Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 185. So glad you could join me. Today's guest is Jennifer Reeser with her book Strong Feather. We'll be talking to her in about 10 or 15 minutes, but before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We just do this. We love poetry, and we know you do too, so please do click the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Leave reviews on iTunes and Spotify and Amazon and Stitcher. Anything you could do to help spread poetry around the internet would help a great deal. Before we start with the main guest, though, we always like to start out with the news poems because it's fun to have poetry relating to the news. And we have Sunday's poet here with us. Sarah Snider is here to talk about the Oscar slap, the slap heard around the world, which is all anybody was talking about a year ago today. And here is Sarah Snider to talk about it a year later. Hey, Sarah, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. It's just I love having you on, and I did not watch the Oscars. I have to confess. Did you watch the Oscars last night?
No,
Yeah, me
I
neither.
slept.
Yeah. I was just having. I was actually at a used bookstore for the whole time of the Oscars, like 2 hours. There's a great one down the road from us, but So tell us about how this poem came to be. Chris Rock finally responds to Will Smith's slap, a kind of memoir. And we all know, we've all seen the slap, which was last year. I remember driving home from something else and hearing about it, and everybody was talking about the slap all over social media. So explain, just frame the poem. How did it come to be, and what is the slap, and what did it mean to you?
I think for me, one of the things that I really enjoy is writing poetry based on newsline, like headlines, kind of articles, simply because here you've got an editor or whoever is kind of promoting this article, boiling down the article or whatever it is into its like most juicy form, enough to get you hooked, but not enough to make it so that you don't want to read the article. And so when I saw that line, Chris Rock finally responds to Will Smith's slap, like almost a year afterwards, I'm like, finally? Like, have we not already heard all about this about a million times and from a million different directions? And it kind of became a part of my experience during that time, where here was this kind of wild public thing happening whilst like a really wild private thing was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And just finding a way to weave the two together, it just kind of tumbled out in that way. And this last couple of months have been, poetry has been a really empowering and cathartic experience dealing with grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's because your father passed away a year ago,
Mhm,
and it was interesting too. I hadn't thought of this fact, but so many people. I think there were three separate people who wrote to me. One on Facebook and a couple emails saying that they had the exact same experience. That they'd always watched the Oscars with their parents, and so having it on, tonight or that night yesterday was something that brought back a lot of memories, for their parents who are now gone. And so it's one of those strange things where generations sort of have a lot of shared memory around. And so, you weren't alone in feeling that connection to your father as the Oscars were going on. Well, do you want to go ahead and read the poem? It's Chris Rock
yeah, sure.
finally responds to Will Smith's slap, a kind of memoir. So let's hear it.
All right. What happened last awards season? Last season when the it colors were different. Zendaya was amazing, is amazing. I am in love with her. My father was unwell, as usual, unwell, is always unwell, maybe more than unwell, but we were ignoring it. No, we were not ignoring it. He was. Did you know that you can get addicted to oxygen? You can. Everyone gasped when that man's hand with a man's anger hit that man's face with a man's shock. He gasped too, getting up to pour another glass of cheap Chardonnay. Gasped the way a bullfrog gasps, deeply and from some cavernous place within. The buzzing about what to do, who should do it, what do you say, oh shit, on live TV, no less. The spectacle of seeing him on the stretcher, so helpless looking in the daylight, an emergency of red and blue lights haloing his confusion, his embarrassment. The cameramen have no idea where to point. Cut to commercial. God, what the fuck was that? Why do I feel like I got hit? My brain is screwing up the past with right now. Right now is not when he got hit. That was the past. Now it is all we're talking about because we secretly hope it happens again, even though now there are rules and procedures. They had to remove his toe. It had gotten so bad they took it, and I'm thinking about it now, and I think that I hate that they took his toe. Will they take my toe when the time comes? That was last year, and this is this year, and it's almost award season again. No, it is award season again. Zendaya is still amazing. I am still in love with her, and my dad is still dead.
Yeah, very touching poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Sarah,
Thank you.
and for being a guest tonight. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you. I
Yep.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Nice
Take care.
to meet you.
Yep. You too. Bye. That was Sarah Snider with yesterday's poem. Chris Rock finally responds to Will Smith's Slap, a kind of memoir. Really touching, moving poem, and just so much, so many great lines in that too. So thanks so much for sharing that, Sarah. Let's take a quick look at today's poem. Ayelet Amate is today's poet, Wandering Womb. And usually we have poems from the issues on Monday. Usually it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or poems from the last issue of Rattle that we're adding online. But we decided, or I decided, I should say, I guess, that we need to catch up because the last issue had this long heroic crown of sonnets by Anna Evans, so it had fewer poems than normal. And so we ended up with this thing where we're moving on to the new issue like too soon a little bit. And so I decided to do a little bit, Poets Respond poems early, and all this week we're going to be doing old poems that aren't online or that we want to pull up and highlight from past issues over a decade ago. And so we started out doing that with having Poets Respond on Monday. And so we have today's poem too. Ayelet's traveling, can't join us today, but here let's her read. This is what she says about it first. This is Ayelet Amate, and here's her description of what's going on with the poem. I was moved by this article on Bindi Irwin's struggle with endometriosis. As a nurse practitioner, I work with many patients who have this condition, which is rendered invisible by society's refusal to talk about periods and other ways women's health affects us all. I wrote this poem as a testament to those patients, including Bindi Irwin. And endometriosis is kind of a mystery. And I was reading about it. I didn't know much about it myself, which is one of the things that makes it interesting to have a poem about, because I get to learn about it, and every readers get to think about it for the first time, maybe, if you don't know somebody who suffers from it. But as I understand it, it's basically that female tissue is sort of all over the body, and so tissue around the body responds to hormone changes in a way that's very painful and difficult, and so that's what Bindi Irwin is struggling with and exposed on this show. And then here's this beautiful poem, A Wandering Womb by Ayelet Amate. Let me let her read it for you. And let's just enjoy this poem today and think about the issue. It's a wonderful metaphors here too. So let's take a listen.
Wandering Womb. Ancient texts named hysteria the source of bodily ills, the womb an animal inside an animal. The littlest Irwin has been studying animals again, this time her own. Cells migrating from the uterus like a great flamingo flock through the tissues, blood fattening the growth, the pain like a great cry or singing. Let us speak of blood, of the wringing out of the lining that fed each one of us. Don't you know how a woman pours herself like a jug of wine? I mean each of us an enchantress, pulling ourselves through the sleeve of ourselves in our own birth.
And again, that was Ayelet Amate with Wandering Womb. Just a beautiful poem. And that metaphor of the flamingo is just so original and interesting. So a great poem to raise awareness about that. That was today's poem on Rattle.com. Of course, if you're not subscribed to the daily poem on Rattle.com, you can go to Rattle.com and sign up for the daily email. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break and go to Jennifer Reeser, today's main guest. So sit tight, relax, and I will be right back with Jennifer. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Like I mentioned, today's guest is Jennifer Reeser. Jennifer is the author of 6 collections of poetry, most recently Strong Feather, this new book from Able Press. Also the author of Indigenous, also by Able Muse Press, which won the Best Poetry Book of 2019 by Englewood Review of Books. Reeser's poems and reviews and translations of Russian, French, along with the Cherokee and various Native American Indian languages have appeared in Poetry, Rattle, the Hudson Review, all sorts of other places. A biracial writer of European American and Native American Indian ancestry, Reeser was born in Louisiana and now divides her time between Louisiana and her land on the Cherokee Reservation in Indian Country near Tahlequah, Oklahoma, capital of the Cherokee Nation, of which her family is a part. And here she is, Jennifer Reeser. Hey, Jennifer, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, Tim. Hello. Thank you for having me on. And thanks to everybody for showing up to listen.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have you. I've been a fan of your work for so long because everybody knows who watches the show that I love formal poetry, and you're one of the poets who really, takes advantage of all the possibilities formal poetry has to offer in your books, and we love Able Muse Press. So it's cool to finally meet you. Do you want to start out with a poem?
Yes, I think that I'll open up with a little bit of light verse. This is called On an Observation by Yeats. And it is from Strong Feather. As you can see, both of those are behind me on the desk. On an observation by Yeats with the epigram. No matter what one doubts, one never doubts the fairies. For, as the man with the Mohawk Indian on his arm said to me, they stand to reason. W.B. Yeats, The Celtic Twilight. The man with a Mohawk Indian tattooed upon one arm would doubtless call it treason, or at the least primordial and crude to doubt the fairies, for they stand to reason. The man with a Mohawk tattooed on his arm may sneer at the idea of water horses, or fallen angels, or a hell to harm, to place unwavering faith in fairy forces.
Yeah, and that was an observation by Yeats from Strong Feather, the newest book from Able Muse Press by Jennifer Reeser. And that's a beautiful cover. They did such a great job with this book, Jennifer. I think something to be proud of for sure.
Thank you.
So, what can you tell us about Strong Feather as a character and how the book came to be? Because for people who haven't read the book yet, of course, it just came out or it hasn't even released yet, technically, I think. Strong Feather is a character that starts out the initial poem, and then you move through Strong Feather poems and also your own personal poems, and sort of it weaves the two in between, this persona character from deep history and your own poem. So how did that come to be?
Well, the first poem in the book is kind of an explanation of it. It opens up in a form, a received form that kind of explains how it happened. It was I actually woke up one morning and found this feather that had been underneath the covers. I had no idea how it gotten there. I hadn't been on a walk, or I don't have down pillows, and so it was just a very strong feather, and as you can read in the very first poem there, it just started my thinking on different tangents about it. And I'd kind of been seeking a new subject, and I thought the phrase "strong feather" just struck me, so strongly that I had to do something with it. So I just came up with what if this could be a metaphor, for a Native American, and then I developed the book around that.
Yeah. It's just a beautiful book and a great character. I mean, you don't see very many persona poems lately. It's sort of something that's gone out of style a little bit. And it's really cool to see a poem, with that persona as the web, the thread that weaves through the entire book. But before we go on, can you, I don't know, the staticky issue, I think to me is worse than it was before. Do you have an external microphone? Can you maybe unplug it Is there like an external microphone you're using, or is it just your computer?
No, this is on my laptop. Sorry.
Yeah, that's really strange. I don't know where it's coming from, but it's definitely okay. Well, we'll try. It's sort of better now. I don't know. We'll see. If anybody watching, tell me if it's not too bad, and we won't worry about it on the chat window. Yeah. So Carla's here in the static too. Yeah. Well, that was kind of going away. So maybe, hopefully, we'll just pray for it to go away, because I don't know what else to do. We tried a little bit in the pre-show to see if we could troubleshoot any of that, and there was nothing to do. But anyway, so tell me about your background in poetry. I'm always curious how poets became poets, but especially you as such a great formalist. All this book, I think the entirety of the book is in formal verse. So how did you come to fall in love with formal poetry, and why do you choose to write informal verse when everybody else seems to not?
I was an army brat. My dad was a warrior, and my formative years, my very first years, were spent on army bases. And my mother says that my favorite thing to do was to stand at the window and listen as the soldiers went past, chanting their cadences. And she said that I would spend forever at the window going with chanting their cadences with them. So apparently I loved it even from the beginning, just the sound and the march and the rhythm and all that. But then I really started writing seriously when I was 11 years old, believe it or not. We had a creative writing assignment for 6 weeks at a new school I was going to. And I just began. It was spontaneous. We would get a story starter or a poem starter at the beginning of every class when I was in 6th grade. Mm-hmm. And I just started writing on that. And as far as the form goes, it was just natural to me. So, I didn't have anybody telling me how to do it. I just wrote limericks because I knew I had the sound and the rhythm in my head. And so I was writing limericks, and I was writing longer rhymed and metrical verses from the time I was 11. So then my very first publication actually was free verse, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
But yeah. And my start in writing, as far as when I got up into, the critical part of it, Robert Olin Butler gave me an award for writing fiction, short fiction, when I was 17, and I was in school. So I was also a fiction writer. But as far as the poetry goes, I guess I just wanted to make it different than my prose work, because I wrote in both forms, in both genres, I should say. So I wanted to make it sound different than my fiction did, and the best way to do that, I thought, was to write in form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's fascinating, because it's one of the things that I just always lament is that more poets don't write in form. It's such an opportunity to expand out and make poems memorable too. Like, they seem like they have just more of a like a stickiness, in your mind when they have formal verse, which is what I love about formal verse. And so I just love your poems for that reason.
Thank you. Well, for me, it was just, I said, I kind of thought, well, I can write fiction, that doesn't rhyme and meter. Why not try doing something different here when I get bored? And I still go back and forth, and I do.
Yeah. Well, before we continue, I think Carla Schwartz has a suggestion on here. So if you go to, this is why we use the whole group for everything. If you go to audio, and then there's an audio settings. So if you click on the little upward thing, there's audio settings, and then
I see it.
And then it says audio profile, and if you have original sound for musicians clicked, that's usually bad. So turn it to the Zoom optimized, and if not, we'll see if that helps a little bit. Some people, Brian Morrison, he'll be on later. He says that the static's not too bad, so I think we'll just not worry about it. I don't know, because I have these good headphones, and so I'm never sure how bad it is for everybody listening and how much is being picked up. But I want to make sure we optimize our recording experience. Do you see that setting?
No, I don't. What is the name of it again?
Under audio profile, there's original sound from musicians, and that's like how it's supposed to be, I guess, for like a perfect, flawless studio environment. So we don't want that. Maybe we want Zoom optimized audio.
Is that an advanced?
No, I
not.
see it. I have it. For me, it's there's speaker, microphone, and audio profile under audio settings.
Okay, I'm just not even seeing
Yeah.
that on my menu. It's where is it located on the screen? It's to the left in the column.
Yeah, so if you go to there's the mute button and there's a little up arrow over it, and then you can click on
Yeah,
audio
I'm
settings.
already
Okay.
on the page. It's got the general and video and audio and all that on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Suppress background noise. I've got it on auto. That's the
Yeah.
option.
Maybe switch it to like low or something.
Okay, let me try that.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if that'll help, but if not, we'll just keep going.
Okay, I got it on low now.
Okay. Yeah, let's just leave it like that, and maybe that'll help. Well, but if not, some people have said it's not too bad. So, and I can also, edit stuff out in the post-production thing. So don't worry about it. So let's just forget about all that. Carla says there does not seem to be static when she's closer to the laptop. So maybe if you move the laptop closer a little bit, that might help. I don't know. We'll try that too. Okay. So let's just pretend all that never happened. And I love that story though about picking up cadences from the military. I think that's really cool. And I've heard people talk about in the past, going to church as like a religious service is something that happens that brings into the experience that sense of rhythm and meter and things that come from that. So it's really interesting that military is a source of that. I really love that story. But let's hear another poem, and we'll see how the sound works for this poem.
Okay. This next one I'm going to read, there's a picture that goes along with it, actually, of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
pull this up.
It's a villanelle that I wrote called My Mother at Lookout Mountain. This photograph of her within a cave, retrieved from trash inside a travel trunk, is what I love and what I have to save. Her chin is raised, her gaze is dropped but brave, as though defying how far she has sunk. This photograph of her within a cave, this scene set in a mountain's architrave to which the Cherokees of old once slunk, is what I love and what I have to save. Behind the camera, equally as grave, I see him taking it, her father, monk. This photograph of her inside a cave. Madonna of the Aracoli nave, lost in a world of halo-wanting junk, is what I love and what I have to save. Its edges warped to form a crumpled wave which heated time and heavy term have shrunk. This photograph of her within a cave is what I love and what I have to save.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then we'll go back to this photograph really quickly. This is a photograph of your mother.
Yes.
That you included. Thanks so much for sharing it. Yeah. And so another beautiful poem, that was My Mother at Lookout Mountain from Strong Feather. And we can already see the way that poems weave in and out of that persona of Strong Feather as a character and your own personal poems. How did you, that's one of the things that seems really difficult. If you have this whole series of poems about a certain character, and then how to make a whole book out of them without like forcing it and without, so how did you decide how to organize the book? That seems like such a complicated thing with a book like this, where you have the character and you have the personal poems and you have sections too. There are several sections which you might want to describe, but so how did the formatting of the poems come to be?
I actually grouped them. If you notice, they're elements.
Mm-hmm.
The sections of the book are elements. And when I was going through the poems that I had on hand, the unpublished group, I noticed that they just naturally seemed to fall into 4 elements. And I said, I said, that just seems so natural to me. So I just began to look through those and categorize them. Was it earth, air, fire, whatever it seemed like the poem spoke of. And so that's how it came about. And as far as internally organizing them, I tried to I tried to just change it up, my tennis shots so that everything wasn't everything wasn't coming at one time. There were things that were personal. If you notice, I also have historical personas that are Native American Indians from history, actually. So I tried to change it up, like I said, and shuffle them around.
Yeah, were there certain poems that didn't quite fit into that rubric, or did sort of
Yeah,
everything fall? And how did you decide? Was it difficult to classify some of the poems? That's an interesting way to comprise a book.
I had to eliminate some stuff that I had that had been published, and they'd been published in good places. It wasn't there was no reason I shouldn't include them. But yeah, they just didn't fit in the overall tone. They didn't fit in with the strong feather character. And I had a little easier time with this because it really is the sequel to Indigenous. Uh, uh, so I had that going for it. But like I said, there were other poems that did have credits to them that I could have put in, but I didn't. So I just put it out. And
Yeah, well, it's such a solid book throughout, and really beautifully produced, and it was really a joy to
thank
read.
you.
Um, so I'd like to talk more about the formal poetry because you do it so well, and it's something that I wonder if the reason why people don't do it as much is just because it's hard. I mean, how much training and exposure to classical formal verse did you have? Did you take classes in it? Did you just read a lot? I mean, how did you come to have this voice that moves so naturally in form?
Well, I'm actually a trained musician.
Ah,
Uh, I was a percussionist all through junior high and through high school. I was both in the youth symphony where we played classical music, and I was also um, in regular band classes. And they sort of I don't want to say they engendered that in me because, like I said, going way back to the time I was 3 years old, uh, I had a knack for it.
hmm
But yeah, they did fine tune it so that I could, and especially being percussion, because those are the timekeepers for the whole group. You
yeah.
know, that's who everybody listens to keep, and they trust for keeping time and regularity. So I think that helped a whole lot, was those years and years of training that I had in measures. We had to do these wicked productions that our sadistic line director would write for us, where we'd have like alternating 7/8, 5/8, 9/8 times, and at the whole time we had to mark time with our feet while we were doing it.
Oh
And
wow.
it was just so I just really got an intense training in those things.
That's really interesting. There's something I always wondered, and I wanted to at some point like scientifically investigate this. But as a formal poet is reading something like iambic pentameter, does the
Mhm.
beat come regular? Like, is it like it's like 4/4 or 5/5 time? I guess you might say. But is it like the every time you get to a stressed syllable? Like, do people speed up? Do you think, at least in your ear and mind, do you speed up as far as the timing goes? The unstressed syllables, like if there was like one of those, two unstressed syllables, then a stressed, that kind of thing. Is that sped up in a way that sort of keeps the rhythm, or is it,
I
or do you
I
think it's not? Is it timed like that?
No, I
Yeah.
think what it is internal devices that we use, like caesura.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what we do, and this is kind of the danger of over editing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an editor also. We also use punctuation. Diphthongs are another, there are all kinds of speech devices, and you could say that it's down on the page, but really we're hearing it in our heads
Mm-hmm.
when we read it. We are
Yeah.
really hearing it in our heads. So anything that is available to us in speech is available to us almost on the page, because somebody out there is hearing it in their head as they're reading it. So like I said, caesura is one of the things that we use to, to slow up or slow down a line. You can also use things like throw in an occasional spondee, which is where it requires a hard stress on two back-to-back syllables.
Yeah.
And that will slow down the line also. So there, we have a number of things available to us other than just the jog-a-trot rhythm of a line.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, so you would say that, as far as time goes, like the beat of a drum, like, the measure of a line. I'm not a musician, so it's hard for me to pull out the right terminology. But so if the measure is like 4 beats to a measure, right? Do you feel you don't feel those beats regular, like the speed changes? Do you think in your head as you read? Because I always wonder if you use pauses, so it's not really related to like a rhythmic beat in that specific sense. Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, it's just really interesting because it sort of seems built, at least one is built out of the other. I don't know if the music is built out of the poetry or the poetry is built out of the music, but they're like offshoots of the same sense of, if you look at the linguistic history, there's that like yo he ho hypothesis,
right?
That like language came out of like the yo he ho, so we get rhythmic movements in our labor. And I just wonder how much music came out of poetry. How deep do you think those roots are related?
They're ancient.
Yeah.
They're ancient. And, I do this all the time in my research and my reading of American Indian poetry. It goes back to chanting. And that is formalism. Chanting is form. Repetition is form. And so it goes back before we have recorded history. It's in our blood. It's in our very beginnings.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the things I think about all the time is that the way poetry's original use was to record stories and through the oral tradition. And I feel like it's similar to the telephone game. The telephone game where you whisper in someone's ear and then you go around the room, and by the time it gets back to you, it's totally changed because everybody like hears something wrong and it becomes a totally different story. But if you have it set to a form, and then it becomes music and it becomes repeated, and we remember it in that like bodily way. And so the story that's really important because it contains the myths that make the meaning that make our lives important becomes something that we can hold on to tightly. Do you find that like because I think you're the only person I've ever talked to who's translated stuff from oral. So like your translations are things that haven't been written down yet. Do you feel like that's central to poetry itself, to record things and fix them so that they don't change over time?
Yes, absolutely. And it was so paramount even to the shamans, the medicine men, when they taught them, they were so serious that when a candidate came to become a medicine man or a shaman, sometimes his test or her test, it was rare to have a female, but most of the time it was a male candidate, and he was made to listen to the formula once and repeat it. And they could weed you out that way. Wow. Because you were to pay attention. And then when the formal training began, it was very strict. And sometimes in some tribes, it was they had to repeat these things exactly as it was presented to them, exactly, no deviation from them, because the magic was in the music to them. So yeah,
and then that's the other thing too that I always like think about is that poetry itself is magic. It's an incantation, a spell that creates some kind of transformation, and so it feels like. Indigenous peoples know this like very directly, and in a way that we, with our, all the technology and things like that we're sort of bombarded by, we have this sort of different, sense of what words do. But words have this deeply transformative property. Can you
Right.
talk a little bit about that, about how poems take you from one place to another?
Well, I think that it goes back to the fact that a medicine man wasn't just about the herbs and the concoctions that he would present. He was a spiritual healer as well. And I really believe that those internal rhythms that we have that mimic and they complement the natural world to which Native American culture was was irrevocably hooked, was a balm of a kind to the spirit or the intellect, whatever, or the soul, whatever you want to say about it. So I think that it was very much a dual healing process,
Hmm.
and much of that came from the dependability, the security of repetition, saying something over and over again. You start to believe it, for one thing, when you're chanting
Hmm.
these sorts of things. So it's very much a spiritual process as well.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating. Like the idea of affirmations that some people do, just saying
Mhm.
like, this is my goal and this is what I want to do. And then it ends up, it seems like the universe replies somehow. And maybe it's the
Yeah.
way that it changes our own state, that we're more receptive to like possibility. But there is something like magical about language itself.
Mhm.
And especially when it's repeated, especially when it has music and rhythm, that changes somehow our consciousness. And God, I don't know how to articulate it or explain it, but there's something magical about it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, let's hear. We've been talking a lot. I want to do a lot of poems. So let's do the next one up. I keep forgetting. I always just love talking to guests,
Yeah.
but we got to do poems too. So let's do another poem.
Right. Okay, well, this next one is it takes a quote from a famous Crow chief who was named Plenty Coup, and this is called Villanelle on a Line by Plenty Coup. The ground on which we stand is sacred ground, the blood of those we love, silt, peat, and sand. For this we and our children too are bound. If you must probe it, make your dig profound, in order to find nature's share of land. The ground on which we stand is sacred ground. Our forebears fill its surface, spin around, take up a fistful, sift it from your hand. For this, we and our children too are bound. With roots to weave their long braids, parched and browned, by burnt lip and bad war deed they are clanned. The ground on which we stand is sacred ground. On this we dance, the drums of sunlight pound, as their life forces and their love demand. For this we and our children too are bound. Where, other than in wind, may they be found? Our feet leave an impression like a brand. The ground on which we stand is sacred ground. For this, we and our children too are bound.
And that was Villanelle on a Line by Plenty Coup. And again, from reading poems from Strongfeather, this beautiful book from Muse Press by Jennifer Reeser. I should say, if anybody has any questions for Jennifer, please leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll pass them along as often as I can. There's already a question from Cindy Gore, who asks a common question for poets who write formally, which is, do you select the form before or after you begin the poem? Did you know that this was going to be a villanelle before it became a villanelle? Or did you, in the process of writing it, did it come to be, or was it revisions? How does a form come to be the form it ends up?
It varies. Sometimes I set out to do an exercise and to strengthen some particular form, like the sonnet that I've got. More often, though, what happens is a phrase comes to me and it just seems to fit into a form of its own.
Hmm.
And I think, oh, this would be great as a repetition, and then it becomes a villanelle because the line I feel like is memorable and strong enough that it could bear repeating that many times.
Hmm.
Other times a line is okay, but I don't want to say it over and over again because I don't feel like it's good enough or strong enough for that. So this one, the villanelle, I think it was like that. I wanted to hammer home what Plenty Coup was saying
Hmm.
over and over again, and so that's why I chose the villanelle form.
Yeah, and that one line, I mean, it's iambic pentameter right there. The ground on which we stand is
Yes,
sacred ground, and then
right. It was
that,
perfect.
and it's a perfect line to repeat, and so you can see how it fits into that form, and just sort of begs you to write a villanelle.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, I think it's very clear how that works. But really great question from Cindy. Um, so how much research goes into a book like this? Is it because there's so many things. There are translations from oral stories. There's the persona character that you invented. There's a whole much goes into it. How much research did you do to go into this book, or was it like family stories that you knew that you just put into verse,
Mhm.
or was there like going to libraries and talking to people and things like that?
I have a very strong relationship with the local tribe here who are called the Kushada or the
Hmm.
Koasati. And so I spend a lot of time with them at their powwows, at the events that they hold here. So I get a lot of I should explain that several of the poems in this book, Strong Feather, are lifted out of the Kushada tradition, and they are my exchanges with actual Kushada members in the tribe here. So some of that it comes from just a lot of social interaction with the Indians, and some of it does come from research, but I wouldn't call it really research. I read all this stuff just for my own entertainment, my own pleasure. So with the historical pieces and things like that, I just wanted to put down in metrical, memorable form some of the greater speeches that have been made. Like Powhatan, my Powhatan monologue, for example. I had read it, but I wanted it to be in a rhythmic, formal delivery that would be more, it would stay with you longer and use some stronger sound devices, I guess.
Yeah. Do you feel like that it's part of your mission to bring that culture into sort of the mainstream and let regular readers experience some of that? Is it something you set out to do, or is it more something that you're drawn to? Like, do you feel like it's a personal relationship with these poems more, or do you feel like that you should be a vehicle to be sharing these stories more widely?
It is primarily just that I'm drawn to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I began in the beginning was with Indigenous. It was Indigenous came about uh, because of the death of the very last of the American Indian family who raised me, and that was my mother's family. And when this happened, they had been so quiet. My family had been, and these were things that you just didn't talk about. And I said, that's not right. That's cheating. That's really cheating people out of what should be. And so I set out to specifically write this stuff down. I said these stories have to be told about practices that were going on in my family as far as the medicine, right up until the 1940s. I said that I have to tell this story. And so I'm drawn to it, but I also feel like it's a responsibility that has been given to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's really interesting because I can't think of that many, American Indian poets who are writing about this. There are a handful that I can think of. We had the chapbook that came out this winter from Kachui Black, and Sherman Alexie. There's certain poets that come out, but there aren't that many, as opposed to like Black poets or Latino poets or things like that. Why do
Mhm.
you think that is? Why do you think there's such a lack of poets doing what you're doing right now?
I think a lot of it is the outside silence that has been imposed upon us.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you an example. In my family, I have a cousin who will tell you they grew up raised, we're Cherokee. They were
Hmm.
told that all their lives. Other families will tell you, a cousin says, you never spoke about this
Hmm.
ever, you know. So I think that a lot of it is that outside imposed silence. And to be honest, I do think that that there is a lot more timidity in the American Indian community because of that. It's just, the generational trauma that goes along that with that. Um, I don't want to say fear
Hmm.
because a lot of times it's smart, you know.
Yeah.
It's not fear. It's intelligence. But I do think that it's a lot of hesitation and timidity about stuff like that.
Hmm. And do you do do you do workshops and things like that on the reservation? Is that something that you work on? I know Arthur Z, the poet in New Mexico, does a lot of things like that. I had there was a class in Arizona that asked for the whole if they could have a class out of the chapbook that we just published.
Mhm.
And so I know some of that's going on. Is that something that you try to sort of bring English language poetry into that environment too, and encourage people to write?
Well, I haven't ever done poetry workshops
Hmm.
there. I tell you, I learned the Cherokee language from the tribe's head linguist.
Hmm.
Durbin Feeling was his name, and just a brilliant man. He was really a modern day Sequoia, was what he was, but also a man named Ed Fields, who is now doing online classes for the Cherokee Nation. I learned from both of those men, but so that's the university setting that I've had,
Hmm.
and but I haven't ever done the actual like poetry workshops and
Hmm.
stuff like that. No.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing a terrible job. I'm so curious about all the stuff that you have to talk about, but we need to do more poems. So let's do another
Yeah.
poem.
Okay. The next one it has to do with my persona, Strong Feather, but this one is not from her lips. It is from her father, and this is in conversation. She's quite an ambitious young woman. She has several things going on, and this is her father speaking to her sagely and wisely, trying to temper her ambition a bit, and it's called Strong Feather's Father. Rise, daughter, wash your face and be a man. Splash ruthlessly, erasing every tear. Then I will introduce you as my son, and you will have your choice of a career. When words engulf you, ponder on this day when you and I conversed. You stilled your lip, and I advised you, set your dreams aside. For you cannot afford such scholarship as has been offered. Neither will the sergeant recruit you to the war against your will, with promise to promote you to potential, if you will sign provided lines and kill. Rise, daughter, once my daughter, now my son. My good for nothing girl, become my boy. Suck up the bitter water pooled before you. No grief displayed, with even less of joy.
And that was Strong Feather's Father, another poem from Strong Feather, the new book by Jennifer Reeser. And there's an interesting way that I noticed you read, Jennifer, which is slow. It's one's slow, but also in the natural cadence of speech, which is really interesting because poets, tend to have that poet voice, which we
Yeah.
talk about, and you don't have that. There's sort of an authority to the way that you read poems. Why do you think that is? Is that something you intentionally do? Is there a way that you think about presenting poems?
No, it's from early criticisms that I had from my husband. He would tell me, he would tell me, "You're too monotone. I hate that." And so I really worked on that because I didn't start out reading very well. I didn't.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to keep going. We got to do more poems. So let's do another one right
Yeah.
off the bat.
Well, I just realized that I switched around the order of those, so I'm going to go back to the one I originally gave you, which is called Shapeshifter, and this is a sonnet. So this is, I guess, the viewers here will know what a shapeshifter is. It is a being that can change form physically. Shapeshifter. They boast of loading weapons to prepare for my arrival through the hostile night. When sentinels intensify their sight on their objectives, difficulties, their predicaments, and too place faith in prayer. I grant them this. They may, of course, be right. But where I crawled the forest floor in flight, behind them like a dart, I now split air. My structures, ever liquid and so strange, move after angry move, for all their quick and graceful wit. How shall they see me coming? Man, so inflexible he cannot change, nor ever know the tactics to that trick of light when drummers turn into their drumming.
Yeah, that was Shapeshifter, another beautiful sonnet from Strong Feather, and I love that as a metaphor, that end when drummers turn into their drumming. It's a beautiful just way of explaining, I think, what feels very central to the book for me, which is the way that, I don't know, like there seems to be a message that we're like everything we're sort of missing in the world is like contained within this book, kind of, because there's a sense of a lack of spirituality and a lack of attention to the moment and attention to community and attention to nature that's sort of all building up in the way that we encounter the world today. I mean, whether you're talking about, the environmental destruction or the speed with which we engage in life. And so we don't, there's this massive, we talked about, I think last week, anxiety and depression being, just off the charts compared to what it used to be historically. There's a way that we feel like we're sort of going off the rails and something's wrong. And a lot of the things that are wrong feel like they're addressed in this book. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the way that we engage with life and how poetry and the messages here are important for that?
I think that that's very, very true. I think that all of our urban endeavors are pulling us away from it. I think a lot of the digital experience is pulling us away from it. That we are losing and have lost so much of our connection to the natural world through all these virtual reality experiences that we have, through our entertainment, our electronic entertainment. And I really wanted to say something because I am a committed nature girl. I mean, I can remember even in my childhood, I would go and disappear into the forest and I would be gone all day long, and my parents never worried about me, but I would just lose myself in nature. And I can't be without it. I really can't be without it. So I wanted to do something that, that I felt like, I feel like nature heals us, whether we're actually ingesting something from it or not. Just observing it heals us in a way that we can't get from any other place. And so I wanted to put that down in the book itself and try to bring that over into a lot of what I feel like is over urbanized experiences, plastic experiences.
Yeah, it seems to me like there's a way that we are sort of increasingly rejecting our own bodies as like like as living creatures, And that because the body is our connection to the actual reality of the universe and the entire environment that we're living in. It's like a disconnection from everything that matters. And so, to me, poetry is a way to reconnect with that. It's a way to reconnect because poetry, the medium of poem, is your body. You feel the rhythm of a poem in the way that your speech is regulated and your breath is regulated, and the breath being what sustains you. And so do you feel like you're doing that? Like, do you feel like poetry is sort of a restoration of what matters in life? Because that's how I think of it.
Yes, I absolutely do. And as far as that goes, going back to our previous remarks that we were making about that, one of the lines from that William Logan wrote once that I will never forget probably is, when something goes wrong, it's usually in the ear. And I love that. I just love that because I think it's true. When something goes wrong, it usually is in the ear. It's a visceral experience that we have, and that the experience of poetry, like you said, it brings us back into those natural rhythms that go on all around us.
Yeah. I think we have 3 poems left. I think we'll have time to get to all 3. So let's do Slain Eagle. Slain Eagle
Okay.
Spirit Speaks. Yeah.
Okay, and this is me doing another traditional thing that we do, and that's taking on the animal mask for a song. And this is called Slain Eagle Spirit Speaks. And this is actually, I based this on a news item that I read. I've got the quote from the Argus Leader of May 16th, 2017. 14 people appeared in court this month for their involvement in illegally trafficking eagles and other migratory birds. Authorities are still looking for another man facing the same charges. The appearances come after a 2-year undercover operation by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service called Project Dakota Flyer. And this is what's called a ballad. A dozen report to judicial court, for mercy is appalled. It is illegal to murder an eagle, if golden or if bald. With those who answer, a buffalo dancer inhales, then holds his breath. 1 man, no, 2, Lakota Sioux, indicted for my death. As I fill with fury both judge and jury, the journalists relaxed. A few faces pale, a pathetic tale, head severed, talons axed. Stuffing like rags into plastic bags meant for trash, but never the noble. They divided me, who had flown so free the airplane seems immobile. No painted pony, no ceremony, no women in vexation with tears who tremble. Observe the symbol of liberty to a nation. Undercover sting to avenge my wing, these agents, by subterfuge through fraudulent talk, apprehend a hawk by playing the paying stooge. To myself, I think, with that slow, wide blink of the wounded, wizened bird, would the verdict come more deserved to some, my testimony heard? Shall I bring disease to enshackled knees, my assailants scorning truce, for my rightful pay, as the shamans say, from humanity's abuse?
And that was Slain Eagle Spirit Speaks from Strong Feather. Just a lesson in the way, because the ballad form is one of those ones that a lot of times we feel is very sing-songy. And you can see the way that they're really rich in jamment. You play against the sing-songy nature of the form by breaking across lines and make it sound beautiful, and you never know what to expect, which is the way that you can make an old form like that sound new. So a great use of that. Can you talk a little bit about your style of writing, itself? Like how did you know a poem like that was going to be something you wanted to write? And then we talked about how the language itself informs the form, and you end up getting the form out that. But how does the revision process go? Is it the kind of thing where you sit down and it comes out that way naturally because you've done so many poems like this, or are you the kind of poet who goes over and over again and changes it and have a lot of revisions of each poem?
Again, it varies. There are poems that I work absolutely to death, and there are others they come out all of a piece, and I feel like nothing ever has to be done to them. So I'm a real moody poet. I'm very moody. And it's never the same with me, and I really can't even predict how it's going to be. But with that one, I think what I wanted to do was I wanted to set up something that was very song-like, because it's a bird.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bird. I mean, we don't really think of eagle songs, but still, it was a bird, and I wanted to make it sing-songy like that, and that was why I thought the ballad form would be best for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so do you how often do you write? Do you have a regular writing practice? Is that like every time a certain time of day that you write, or do you do it as you sort of inspiration strikes, or you have time?
For decades, I wrote every single day. I just made myself write every single day. But just the last few years, I guess I've kind of slowed down with that, and I haven't really felt like I have to make myself do this. I give myself a little bit more leeway to just be inspired first, rather than that hard driving, work ethic.
Yeah. Well, we have a little bit of time. Let's do the second to last poem now.
Okay. Well, this one, as you mentioned earlier, my other home is on the Cherokee Reservation in Oklahoma, and I met my husband there. I went to school in Oklahoma. I had my first child in Oklahoma. And for those of you out there, there is a Cherokee Reservation. The McGirt decision is what put the Cherokee back on the map, as it were. Before that, it's a very complicated story, but there is a Cherokee Reservation, and the Cherokee Nation does refer to it that way. So now you know. But anyway, when I was up there, working during my courtship with my husband, I worked with a lot of Cherokees and a lot of American Indians, and one of them was just a guy. He was a butcher that worked alongside us, and he was Cherokee Nation. Well, later on, he was promoted to the head of tribal gaming for the Cherokee Nation, and this is we would get telephone calls for him, and over the PA system, they would say, "Willie White Killer, line 1," and that is a common name. White Killer is one of the common names there among the Cherokee, and it would just make us laugh to see the people who weren't used to names like that, to hear this name, White Killer, over the intercom. So this is to Will White Killer upon his promotion to head of tribal gaming. White Killer, how I miss those distant days when through our busy marketplace, your name called across the open air could raise customer eyebrows, whittling while it came, each client's pale cheeks, when the violent phrase was voiced, an arrow having struck its aim. Those twilights underneath the Tulsa sun where cyclone rains in rouge and copper run. Coercing memory, I see you still, blood streaked from throat to thigh, your knife in hand, unpacking at a slab the morning's kill, shipped coldly 6 hours west from no man's land. A hunter tamed with introverted skill. Now, clothed in silk and linen, there you stand, commander of the cards. Who knew then, Will, these tribal trails which neither of us planned? Who knew then, you a butcher, I a scribe, we each would prove so loyal to the tribe?
Yeah, and that was to Will White Killer upon his promotion to head of tribal gaming. A fun poem from Strong Feather. One thing I wanted to ask about too is the sense of community within the formal poetry group. It feels to me always that the sort of marginal groups within poetry have better communities. Like the haiku community is wonderful, and around Able Muse, which is a great press, there is that erratosphere, that message board that was so popular for a long time, and there's a sense that of support that that people get from other people that are writing formal poetry too. Do you feel that way? How did you feel about entering that group? And do you feel like part of the group? And can you say a little bit about that? Because it's interesting to me. I always wish that regular sort of the more mainstream poetry had that spirit of support that the subgenres have. We have an NFT poets issue coming up in the summer, and NFT poets have the same kind of just supporting each other sort of feel. What's your experience been like that with Able Muse?
I love the place. I've been devoted to it for decades. I was online there almost as soon as it went up, as a matter of fact, and just very involved. I do feel a responsibility, but it's also a joy to me. It's not just a responsibility like some might say, but it's a joy to me to see the people taking so much pleasure in something like that, because let's face it, nobody gets rich writing poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's genuine, especially with a marginalized group. Like you said, that it's a labor of love with these people. And so I like to encourage that. I like to encourage love. So I feel like it is important for us to stick together in that, especially when you are a minority. And I know a lot about being a minority. I know how it feels. And so I want to lift others up. I hate the crabs in a bucket mentality. I hate that.
Yeah.
And I think if only we could come together, because there's room for us all. There really is. You're tempted to think, oh, there's so much competition, but you really, that is an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
You lift each other up, and everybody benefits when you do that.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor, that crabs in a bucket.
Yeah.
I mean, so many times poetry feels like that a little bit, and far too much. So that brings up another question, just in general. Why is it that you write poetry? Why do you think that you're drawn to poetry? Maybe you could close out on that question. What about poetry? I mean, we're talking about the whole episode maybe, but why poetry and not other genres? Why poetry and not, doing other things with your life? Why poetry?
Yeah. I've always loved reading. My grandmother used to tell the story. She would say that Jenny, they called me Jenny growing up. Jenny could not walk from one room to the next without a book in her hand and her nose in the book. So I have just always loved words and the written word and the actual act of reading. And so it was just natural for me to start writing them. And, you say, and suddenly say, look, mommy, I wrote a book, but it was also encouraged by my family, who are very literate people. My mother, as a matter of fact, my name comes from a pact that my mother made with her best friend, that whoever had, they wrote a series of detective stories about where the main character was named Jennifer. And they made a pact that whoever had the first baby girl would name her Jennifer, and I was that girl.
That's great.
It was very valued. The literary thing was very valued in my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's great to see. We're so glad that you're doing it. And we have time for one last poem. So let's close out with the last. We got through all of them, even though I thought I was talking too much. That's perfect. Let's do.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
This one's another personal poem. I'm American Indian through both my mother and my father. My mother's people come from the Cherokee and out east, but my father's are from the Plains people. And when he first moved down here to Louisiana, it was during the days of desegregation. And my father's very dark. He couldn't pass. And so he was actually refused service in some places. They would say, we don't serve your kind here. And so that's the title of this poem, which is Our Kind. Hair black as plumes around the roaming crows, flesh dark as copper kettle drums when burned. My father brakes, decelerates, and slows to stop for fuel, only to be spurned. We do not serve your kind here, comes the warning. From counters stocked with 10 tobacco brands by Injun names. I'm with him on this morning in soul. I see the carved wood chief which stands beside. Cigar store statue, why remain? Vice salesman underneath a metal-signed injunction made against your very grain itself, a sad debauchery of kind. Why linger at those exploitative doors to scare my father's kind, and mine, and yours?
Yeah, great ending on that sonnet. Our Kind by Jennifer Reeser from Strong Feather. Just a wonderful book. Hope everybody picks it up from Able Muse Press. Of course, you can find Able Muse Press at ablemusepress.com. If you're interested at all in formal poetry, especially, Able Muse is like the place to be. You know, Anna M. Evans, who we talked about already on this episode a little bit, was through them, and so many other great formalist poets are there. Wonderful press, wonderful publisher there. Oh, what's the publisher's name?
Able Muse.
Yeah, what's the publisher's name?
Alexander Pepin.
Alexander Pepin. Yeah, I was drawing a blank for a second, but Alexander Pepin is just an amazing person to put all this stuff together. So wonderful book. Hope everybody checks it out. And Indigenous too, which you can see in the background of Jennifer's screen there. Yeah. Indigenous, the sort of prequel to Strong Feather, a pair of wonderful books by Jennifer. What you got coming up now, Jennifer? Are you still working on a similar type of poem? Are you moving to other things, or are you sort of in a limbo between the two?
I've started lately writing, going back into fiction. I had a little chapbook with a short story that was published by Bell Point Press a few months ago. So I'm kind of going back to the short story thing, and I think I'm maybe gonna try novel. I don't know.
Well, excellent. Thanks so much, Jennifer, for being a guest. Great to finally meet you, in person, get to talk to you, because I've been enjoying your work for a long time. So it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, and thanks to everybody for watching.
Yep. Take care. Bye. It was Jennifer Reeser. You can find more of Jennifer's work at jenniferreeser.com. Spelled just like you'd think, Jennifer and then REESER.com. So now we're going to take a quick break. We have open lines coming up. And for the open lines, let me tell you how it works. We also going to have Brian Morrison. So Brian, I know you're watching on YouTube. Come back to the Zoom, Brian, and we will share your poem that won the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor in just a little bit. So we're going to have Brian on the open lines as well as open lines themselves. And so how you do it, email your poem first to openmic, that's openmic @rattle.com. That way I can show it on the screen like I was showing Jennifer's poems. Then I'm going to deploy the links to this Zoom, to Facebook and YouTube. You can join us over on the Zoom only if you want to share poems. But if you do want to share a poem, whether it can be a prompt poem, a news poem about current events, it can be a poem that you published recently and are proud of and just want to share, whatever you would like to do, join the Zoom and share a poem, because that's what we're here for. So I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back with more poetry. Well, hello again. Thanks so much for your patience. Now we have Brian Morrison here, who is this year's Neil Postman Award for Metaphor winner for Lighting the Rocket, which was in last spring's issue. So let's say hi to Brian right now. Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Doing well. How is everyone here?
I'm great. Yeah, congratulations on winning this award. It's funny. I don't know if you probably didn't see, but on the Critique of the Week a few weeks ago, we sort of read your poem and on all the ones I was trying to debate between. And, it was a very tough call between a few poems, but your poem has so many great metaphors, and the whole poem is an extended metaphor too, which sort of, and it's just a great memorable poem as well. So the way the award works is we give it each year in honor of Neil Postman to the person who uses metaphor the best in every issue each year. And it's really a very, it's a general way of thinking about it. Like we can do whatever we want, which is the fun part. And it's, I think, 17 years now, and Lighting the Rocket was this year's winner. So can you talk a little bit about how the poem came to be first and how you approach making metaphor? Because the interesting thing, when we did this prize, we thought that there'd be a lot of options for every issue. Now we publish about 250, 300 poems a year. We thought that maybe that all the poems would have metaphors and it'd be like pulling out the best ones. But it turns out that there's like a dozen candidates maybe out of the 250 that really use metaphor in a real meaningful way. And so it's always surprising how hard metaphors are to find. So how do you approach metaphor, and how did this poem come to be? A long question, but we'll hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, metaphor is hard, no doubt. I think whenever I'm writing a poem, my entire goal is to avoid idle language, right? To keep things rolling, keep things moving, keep things active. And sometimes the best way to do that is to try to work in some sort of a figure of speech, right? A simile, a metaphor. And this poem came about. It's a poem that I'd tried to write many times for many years, right? Just a sort of coming of age story. A lot of what happened in the poem is really happened, right? When I was a kid, we were on a baseball field and we were trying to light this rocket, and this woman ran by. It wasn't me, but I was with these people, these other kids. I think we were all like 8 or 9 years old, and some friend of mine, I don't even remember which, started yelling at this woman, right? And it was just the sort of thing that I have always been interested in writing about, but had only recently, obviously, in the past few years, have really been able to try to write about. So I mean, Lighting the Rocket started off with just this basic story, and I think the metaphor for me, like I said, is always just this way of trying to keep things rolling, keep things in the poem moving forward, right? I mean, I talk to my students about the horizontal movement, like this stopping to smell the roses, right? Is how I talk to them about it, right? So in a poem, I think it's important that you have the vertical movement, you have the beginning, the middle, the ending, right? Or you have the premise building to the conclusion. But I think once in a while you have to stop and do that horizontal movement where you stop and show something, build something, draw something, right? So, and whenever I'm writing, that's sort of a conscious goal of mine, is always when to stop and when to start trying to work into the figures of speech.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I answered the question, but
no, definitely. I'm here. Let's hear the poem, and then we'll talk a little bit more in detail about it. Why don't you go ahead and read it?
Yeah, sure. Lighting the Rocket. It was almost finished. The rocket fuse nearly lit. Wind blew flame to my thumb, blackened it. A woman walking in grape ape purple headphones crossed the street, then sped into a jog. We yelled, "Run faster, bitch," or we didn't. What was said was maybe worse. I don't know what I said, but my mouth is a casket for it. What boys say to women should stop their hearts. The woman's husband stomped over not 10 minutes later while she sat in the car behind sunglasses, and the shitty rocket was still grounded. He told us with a sharp finger we were punks and the worst kids in the neighborhood. Maybe we were. We traded black eyes and split lips just for fun. We threw ice cubes and eggs at the gas station that sold us cigarettes. Misogyny was a word we didn't yet know, and we were heart-shaped beating ourselves against rib cages to end the moment. The man was one of us, and we knew it. My grandpa used to say he held his mouth right, and he did. The lips just so, teeth set in seeth. The polyurethane caked on his chest from the fridge factory on Stoley Lane was proof enough. Stupid, he said. We knew our father's fists better than any teacher's best efforts. The man eyed the rocket, us. He saw the shame in our faces, said, fuck it, let me. And he grabbed the lighter out of my hand, quick as rainfall. The brush of his watch over my thumb was lightning to sand and left what felt like a jagged glass shard spiked into my skin. He said, women shouldn't be afraid to walk the sidewalks around you idiots. As he hiked up his gray Saturday sweatpants, picked up the rocket, shook it, pulled the fuse out, it pulls out, and lit the fucker. We all watched, close-lipped. We held our mouths right. As the white blue cylinder flew up unsteady in a high wave, was left thrown by the wind, then thudded down like a shot bird across the field. The woman, headphones looped around her neck, stepped out, picked up the rocket, and set it at our feet with a shark eye glare under raised shades. You'd be cuter kids if you smiled more. The rocket smoked right there until it didn't.
Yeah, that's Lighting the Rocket by Brian Morrison, the 2023 Neil Postman Award for Metaphor winner. And so I love the way you talked about a poem having vertical and horizontal movement. And so does that mean that when you wrote the poem, you wrote it out and then you realized there were places you could pause and you sort of in revision, you stretched it out and added those metaphors? Like my mouth is a casket for it. The metaphor about the lightning, the glass shards of the touch. Is that something that you did in the revision process? I mean, maybe I'm just trying to sort of help people come up with better metaphors. So would you take a poem and then add the metaphor later? Is that kind of what you're saying?
A lot of times, yes. Yeah. I mean, Jennifer was talking about this previously, right? Like some poems come very quickly and some some take years. This one took years, right? I mean, many revisions. I couldn't even tell you which draft this is, right? Um, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, right, the first draft is some metaphors fall in, right? But most metaphors I think definitely come in revision, trying to find places where the language gets idle or the rhythm's not quite right or things aren't just falling into places as they could, right? Yeah, metaphor is often something I do in revision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
metaphor, any figure of speech, really.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So great advice, everybody, and I hope people will try to inject metaphors in their poems and then submit them, and then maybe win the award next year. And,
inject them.
yeah. So the other thing I want to talk about too, we called it the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor because Neil Postman, especially in Amusing Ourselves to Death, his seminal book, talked about metaphor as an instrument of perception, and it does feel to me like the metaphor is the way of sort of creating order out of chaos, like creating meaning out of like just the mess of our lives. And then we get the order, we get the metaphor so we can sort of understand something. And then it ends up sliding into cliche eventually because it's something everybody knows. But so because it functions like that, it seems like metaphor is like the pinnacle of poetry, first of all. And also as an instrument of perception, a great metaphor has this sort of like reaching beyond itself feeling. And so the whole metaphor of this like the childhood, I don't know, the childhood sort of, I don't know what to say, the feeling of coolness or something, or the whatever, the way kids are sort of launching up and then fizzling out at the end is sort of an extended metaphor in the whole poem too. How did that one come to be? Was that something that came, was it something you knew you were running toward that feeling, or how did that come to be?
Oh no, I had no idea I was writing toward that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was writing about the rocket and, I got to the end and I was like, well, okay, I have to end this somehow, right? This last version here. And the rocket smoked right there until it didn't was the last line. It kind of hit me. Yeah, I should probably work in more of that rocket throughout. Right. As sort of a pivoting point for all of the other language to come back to. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it kind of, like I said, it came together over many, many, many revisions and versions, right? I mean, I think the first time I wrote the poem, it was like 4 pages long and it was in couplets,
oh,
right?
Wow.
So I mean, it's vastly different than it once was.
Yeah, well, that's just great. I think I'm very glad to have you on because it's great advice to everybody. Keep persistent at it and keep working at it and keep injecting new ways of getting things out, and it'll pay off eventually. It's a wonderful poem and great use of the metaphor. Congratulations on the prize again, and thanks so much for talking about it today. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know about the prize, right? Like, I was very surprised to get it. Like,
Yeah, well,
thank you so
that's
much.
definitely a happy email. I was glad to be able
Yeah,
to send it to you. Thanks, Brian. It was a pleasure.
yeah. Thank you.
Yep, take care. It was Brian Morrison with Lighting the Rocket from last spring's issue of Rattle, this year's Neil Postman Award for Metaphor winner. If you want to check out the all the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor winners, we have a whole set of 17 of them, and all the different ways people do metaphor. So we have, I'll show it on the screen. We have a whole bunch of people here. Jim Velvis, Craig Van Ruyen, Jose A. Alcantara with a divorce, that divorce as like a bird crashing into a window. I love that. And The Woman Said by Kelly Grace Thomas. This is that list of so many metaphors. Just wonderful poems here. Check them out at rattle.com/postman, and you'll find that. But thanks so much for Brian again for sharing that poem and just making poetry worthwhile. It's those kind of great poems that make this all worth doing what we're doing. So thank you for that. Now we're going to go to the actual open lines now. And we have 10, 9, well, actually we got 2. So we have, we have 7 people online. That's not that many today, actually. So let's see. The prompt for this week, and if you'd like to join, I should say, find the chat, find the link to Zoom in the chat windows on Facebook and YouTube. And feel free to do that and join us and share a poem. Anything you'd like, previously published poems, Poets Respond type poems about the prompt. And the prompt for this week, I'll put this on the screen right now. The prompt was to write the longest poem you can in a single sentence. And that was because we noticed with last week's guest that, which was James Davis May, that a lot of the poems in Jim's book were single sentences or maybe 2 sentences for a whole poem down the page. So we thought we'd try to push a sentence as far as we could and write a poem. This was mine. And here we go. This is a single sentence called High-End Motel. No, High-End Hotel, I should say. High-End Hotel. The heavy door's high-end lock beeps behind you after the whisper click of the air against the high-end doorframe, and you shuffle down the long hall of doors like dominoes, each one sleek as midnight, deep as the hole at the center of the galaxy, each room its own universe, flecked with stars as you move past at the speed of light over the high-end carpet whose lushness is not lost on your slippered feet, a fabric so soft you find yourself personifying as if you were a masseuse, your feet a massage, and it thinks, where did I go? And it thinks you, yes, the carpet, thanks you for pressing your heels deep into its tissue as you tirelessly trod to the elevator room. Its gleaming bank of metal doors a modern ladder angels must ascend, but you descend with the rush of a fatal drop. 39, 33, so many floors, the numbers proudly speeding up, then slowing down until you reach the lobby, its celestial spheres of chandeliers, and the man at the desk, his attire more crisp than bacon, more crisp than the freshest apple, more polished than you would feel lying prone at your own funeral, laced with a mortician's makeup, your face finally in death a work of art, your very casket not as polished as the high-end stone he stands behind as you ask in your most confident voice where you might find the ice machine, where there were no signs, you see, and usually there are signs, but no, he tells you, there is no ice machine, peon, so please proceed backward up the elevators, down our longest high-end hallway, and simply send a text for room service. So that was one sentence, as far as I could push a sentence. High-end hotel. I got to fix the typos and my scrolling technique. But that was my poem for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's see what everybody else has for the prompt or anything else. And we'll go to the hero of the day, I think. Carla Schwartz is first up because she told us how to fix the audio problem that Jennifer was having, I think. Thanks, Carla. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm waiting for the snow.
Oh, you're getting some snow. We are done, I hope. And it rained over this weekend, and so we had that 7-footer, and now most of it's melted. So I even like plowed my car into like a parking spot that wasn't a parking spot before. Very happy that I could do that. How much are you supposed to get? What's it like?
Potentially, I'm in the Boston area. Potentially like 10 inches tomorrow. Yeah, overnight. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good amount. So what do you have to share with us? Let me pull it up. I forgot to go to
Yeah.
online.
So
There we go.
if it's just one poem, I'll start with this prompt poem. You'll let me know if there's time for two. And this prompt poem, I don't always write sentence poems. Sometimes I've tried to write sentence poems and then I feel like they need more punctuation, but this is my attempt. I wrote it last night and it's called Bad Instagram, She Sang Flowers. This catchy tune everyone dances to on Instagram, I learn is called Flowers, a song by someone named Miley. I wouldn't know from a hole. Don't ask what music my head has been in. As pop as I get is Lake Street Dive and Dirty Loops because they're good. But Miley's marketers have actors like Kevin and Diane and others walking in the rain, pacing the fields, dancing. Someone paid for the song to play for me on Instagram every time I scroll. So I stop and watch the hips sway and wonder about this person, Miley, and mostly feel taken in by the paid ads and scroll on. But tonight I turn my phone on D&D and head out for an open mic in a church turned Center for Arts to listen to original songs or original interpretations, love songs, Blind Willie, and other covers. But then one woman gets up on stage, announces she's got Miley in her pocket. Miley, the one I've learned to skip over, swipe up or swipe down from. And now this woman, off rhythm, off key, sings Flowers by Miley. It's bad Instagram all over again. But this time I'm unable to scroll past her. All I can do is shake my head, listen, and try to love myself better.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Carla. Yeah, wonderful poem. And I wonder, I love that it's bad Instagram all over again. That concept of bad Instagram is really funny. I think what we should do today probably is do like a 2-page max. Let's say that. So if you have another 1-page poem that you wanted to share, feel free.
It's pretty short. I sent you a link.
Okay.
It's one of my NFT poems.
Ah, interesting.
And this actually first appeared in a book that I wrote called Mother, One More Thing.
Okay.
And so this poem, which originally started as a 1-sentence poem, but now isn't. It's called Addressing What's Broken. I wish I were good with tools so that when the stove timer doesn't keep time anymore, I would know how to pull off the knob and recoil the spring or set it straight just so that when I turn the knob, I could depend on the ticking of minutes, the quiet panting until the annoying mechanical buzz would saw against the silence. I wish, too, I could find my refrigerator model number and know how to replace the door gasket when it arrives. For now, I'm good with duct tape. It holds 2 doors kissing when magnets no longer attract.
Yeah, excellent poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. And you can see, for people who are not familiar with NFTs, like I mentioned a little bit ago, we have that NFT issue coming up in the summer. And this is one of the hosts or places you can list NFTs. It's on the Tezos blockchain here at Object. And that is the environmentally friendly and inexpensive to mint blockchain. And so how that works is that the poem exists kind of forever on the blockchain in a way that like can't get rid of it. And so it's sort of a way to fix your poems and keep it here. And you can purchase it right now for 3 Tez. So if anybody's interested, and I think I'm really happy that we picked Object as sort of the one to promote the most, because now Object lets you just buy things with a credit card, which is amazing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a new option that they didn't have like a month ago. And so very neat. You can permanently own this NFT. So thanks for sharing that, Carla. It's really fun to share
I'll put a link
new
in
places.
The YouTube.
Yeah, excellent.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to share new
All right.
places we can share poems. So thanks so much. It's always fun.
Thank you.
Yep, take care. That was 2 from Carla Schwartz. Next up, let's go to Mike Bales. And again, I think we're going to do
Well,
we're going to do a 2-page max is the rule
well, I've
for
just
today.
got one. I just got one I didn't prepare. There's news. I was interviewed on a program for Muscatine Public Access TV called Library Alive.
Oh, that's neat.
I've sent you the link. You can flash it on the screen or not. It's up to you.
Yeah, let me pull this up. So tell me about it. What was it that what are their show like?
It was wonderful. I've done different interviews, but this is really fun. There's a librarian who actually hosted me, who used to work at another library, who hosted me there as a featured author. But she was down there as two people, as arranged through the Muscatine Writers Group, Writers in the Avenue. Great thing is their version of the Today Show or whatever. Like, I was interviewed for like 15 minutes, half hour. They first started like showing a picture of the river along Muscatine, and they were kind of chatting. Then they kind of interviewed me, which is a lot of fun. It's kind of crazy. They are complimenting me on my humor. It just was the way that interview was going. I read a short story of mine that was in my book, Second Hope, and a poem that was in my book, Second Hope. And they put me on the spot. At the end, he had a kind of quiz, which I kind of figured out. I kind of went, now you're going to embarrass me, but they're having me say what a word meant, and I figured it out. So, yeah, anyone who wants to watch, it'd be a fun interview to watch.
Yeah, very cool. So
So-
we showed a little bit of it there. You can find it at. How can we do? I guess we can put the link in the chat window, Mike, and then people can find it because it's too complicated of a link to say. But put it in the YouTube chat screen, and then
I'll have to do it some other time. I don't have it. I sent it.
Okay.
I sent it.
Well, maybe I can
I don't
actually.
wanna
While
flip
you're reading your
through
poem, I
pictures.
can do that in a second. So let's do that.
But
So what poem do you want to share tonight?
love and affection as a run-on sentence. I was answering 2 prompts of yours last week. Write a long sentence poem, and this is actually twice as long as my shortest piece of flash fiction, believe it or not.
Interesting.
And also, there's something about an emotion, then have a grammatical term. So I was kind of doing both prompts.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's hear it.
And this is about a long-term friendship. Love and affection as a run-on sentence. Our friendship was a river from the time when we met in her office my junior year, and I was young, our time flowing from fall to spring to an idle summer when we talked to each other just to talk, and friendship we found when later we talked about our loves, and we found our friendship as we became something more like a dance to a soft song, a whisper in my ear, and poems shared it at her kitchen table and over tea. And I was scared and learning about life, and she knew the world, and the world turned, and our friendship evolved, and others were come and gone, water into the bridge, and senior year came and passed, and even after I graduated, we called each other time and time again, and time again. We talked to each other as our lives changed, but the friendship remained, and she put me up one night so I could see a Fleetwood Mac concert, and my life was a song, and memories flooded my mind. My mind always returned to an afternoon in the park as we embraced our precious time, captured by our breaths, reverent silent at the edge of town as traffic passed, reflections of the glorious sun and water, the whispers of trees, the river as it flowed onward, the sight of a crimson leaf drifting downward, ever downward.
Great use of the one sentence. Thanks so much for sharing that. Love and affection is a run-on sentence. I do. I can't help it. I love those long, running, just never-ending, never let you catch a breath type poems. Thanks for sharing.
QC Poets told me not to do that.
Oh, really?
But I did it for this prompt. Yeah.
Well, every rule is meant to be broken. That's what the rules are here for. So thanks for doing that and sharing it, Mike, as always.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, bye. There's Mike Bales with love and affection as a run-on sentence. And I remind you that if you'd like to join, go to the Zoom link, which is deployed and pinned on Facebook and YouTube's chat windows. And we have a 2-page max today. So one poem that's like longer, or 2 poems that are shorter, whatever you would like to do. Dick Westheimer is up next. Let's see what Dick's got for us tonight.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Dick, how you doing?
I'm I'm such a happy guy. Jennifer's interview, and then Brian, was that the name of
Yeah,
the?
Brian Morrison.
Yeah, those two combined are sort of a little two little master classes in one. So I'm going to go back and
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder if that way that thinking about metaphors is something that you inject after the fact is something I'm going to have to try. Maybe that should have been like the prompt. Maybe for next week we'll make another prompt to do that. But that's an interesting way to think about it. I wonder how many of the winners have done that before. But anyway, what do you have that you'd like to share?
well, one other thing about Brian's is I
Yeah.
really love the notion of sitting, like finding a place in the middle to, I guess I don't get my horizontal and vertical correct, but this way, to go this way.
Yeah.
Uh, and I just love the image of Jennifer as a little girl in front of the window, marching in time to the soldiers out. So the whole thing was the YouTube comments are worth reading for you if you get a chance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely look back. Thanks, Dick.
Yeah, so I think I will read both of the poems I have. I'll first start with my Poets Respond poem, Neologisms. I'm not really good at pronunciation, but
Okay. Yeah. Explain what it's about while I pull it up then.
yeah. So it's there was a an article on NPR about Merriam-Webster put out a tweet asking for people to come up with words that don't have precise translations into English.
Oh, that's a great prompt. Yeah.
Broader concepts,
Mhm.
and so that's sort of the background for the poem.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. I got it.
Yeah, okay. I'm not gonna mispronounce the title again. Sorry. Here, there are words remaining to be made. Let us coin one for the dark between the stars, that space which contains the rest of everything. Now let's conjure a single syllable for the spread of my hand covering the width of my lover's back. Oh, and can we make a name for that time in the middle of some days when everything stops spinning, or one for the little cloud of gnats that gowns the air before me in the woods, or another for the daub of light on a leaf illuminated by a single firefly. I will make a lexicon for each today and say it just to you. Every entry will be a conjugation of awe, each a declination of the sorrow that such nouns cannot exist for more than that one moment in which it is whispered. Here, here, lean close as we become one another's breath. Breathe, say with me all the right sounds, and let your sigh run right through me and back out to become the space between the stars. My fingers splayed across my lover's back, the air stirred by the beat of a single gnat's wing, a small daub of light.
Yeah, beautiful poem as always, and that really ties into a lot of the stuff we were talking about today. And two, I keep thinking about, the way that I don't know if you like naming things. Going back to Genesis, like the logos is that sort of spirit of naming and understanding, and pulling order out of the chaos. And once you name a thing, it becomes like an object, and then it has a history too, and it becomes more real to us. And then metaphor is the way we name things. And so it all like builds together into what poetry is really doing. So really fascinating. That's a great poem. I love that cloud of gnats too.
There's Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea trilogy, which is a children's book, but is one of my favorite trilogy of books. Is an entire three book series about naming and the power of names.
That's
and
great. I
then
have to check that out.
Yeah, she followed, and it's a great book to read to kids of any age, including my age. And later, she wrote an essay for the New Yorker called "She Unnames Them," which was a story about Eve, like figuring out that Adam had taken control of these creatures by naming them, and she went by one and unnamed them.
So that's so great. Oh, that is wonderful. Yeah, I love that. I got to check that out because I've read one book by Ursula, but that's it. Very cool. So, but let's do the other poem too. Is this the one sentence poem?
It started off as a one sentence poem, and I didn't like it. The ones that you and Carla read and Mike read, they were fabulous. They just like the one sentence just propelled them. Mine just turned it into a muddy mess. So I undid it and
Uh-huh.
reconnected it and took out the inner guts, and it's just a poem.
Yeah. Well, the goal is to inspire you, so it sounds like it worked anyway, even if it wasn't
Right.
one sentence. Let's hear it.
It's called The Hot Tub and the Piece of Wild Things. I am not sure if I am required under the Standards Committee of Poets Trading in Truth to tell you about my hot tub or the poems I've composed there, me in my loose sack of aged thin skin, naked and brined. I do know if I had not been there, submerged to the chin under the King Lear locust, it bark blind and showing more years of scarred limbs than this body of mine, I'd not have seen the bluebird, solitary and in full bluebird bloom, alight on our laundry line, sit so still that the new snow accumulated on its back. I would not have noted the peaked roof on the house across the way completely disappear under a light white blanket, would not have heard how insistent a cardinal was, even on this foolish spring morning. But I am no piece of wild things poet. These waters I recline in are not fit for the wild drake. So I wonder if I could mend the world by trading places with it, me go out naked into the highway and live wire stitched day and give the remainder of creation one moment of watching the bluebird shake snow from its wings as it rose into the gathering gray. Would I?
Oh, that's just a great poem. Yeah, I love that. Hot tub and the piece of wild things. Beautiful poem as always, Dick. Always a pleasure hearing you read and seeing what you come up with every week.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Yep.
It's been a great evening. Wonderful evening.
Yep. Thanks. Take care. So, Dick Westheimer with 2 poems. Let's go to Karen Marker next. Oh, you're on mute still, Karen. Let's see. There you go.
Yeah, it's hard to follow Dick, but at the same time, in a way, this poem is about naming as well.
And, perfect.
And was pulled by several influences that I won't name till I get to the end of it. It was an attempt to do the one sentence, but I don't really actually think it's working, and it's still a work in progress. So sorry, we'll see how it sounds to you, but I don't think it's really one sentence.
Well, that sounds great. Well, with those caveats, let's hear it. To the created world. Yeah, let's hear it.
To the created world. Let this day be a magic act, borrowed and born from the folds of the morning, a handkerchief shaken, and there pops the wings of a smoke blue bird, a redwood tree lit up with branches like candles. It blows out, the wind singing happy birthday and rum tum tum diddly dum, me and my sister and our cat singing along to the umphalos of the world, issuing breath. Ding dong bell, kitties in the well. Let it be a day I understand Joyce's Ulysses, crazy word creations. Find fresh fish fresh in the lazy lake. Watch them grow up, leap over the edge. Rub-a-dub-dub, 3 maids in a tub. Let this be my childhood film clips. Spliced together, my mobile eyes, wave speech, moon's milk oozing from the sleeve of the sky. Under my flared red velvet dress, my petticoats in black slippers, let me plie on polished wood floors. See myself in multiple mirrors while Miss Scodell watches, my mother's hands on the keys of another piano concerto, playing the fable of my family, infused with desire. Let me remember watching what caused fear the first time the screen came down, the lights went up, the first train wreck. Let me recreate unspoken wonder, my parents transparent, hardly touching. Let me go back.
Oh, I love where that went. That was a surprising turn there at the end. And I think that's one of the ways, I think, if you keep pushing yourself, surprising things come out. I think that was apparent in that poem. That was really cool. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was Karen Marker with To the Created World. Have a nice night, Karen. Next up is Audrey Friedman. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 poets left, and we could probably do a couple extra poems. But hey, Audrey, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, terrific. Once again, the prompt surprised me.
That's great. That's what we try to do.
So the sentence could have gone on for way longer, but so be it. Recreation. On the beach, I keep one tiny stitch of my mother alive. Try to preserve the synapses between periods of crazy, the quiet between percussive thuds and amphetamine highs, crests and tumbles. There is stasis between the water's advance and retreat, between swallowing and spitting back everything. A time with no charged arcs, no sparks, just a predictable but graceful dance, like my 2 needles execute, sliding into each woolly loop, then out, knitting something to gift to my daughters, something more certain than sand.
Great choice to end it there. Great ending. And I love the opening line too. So it's like a perfect sandwich of great lines.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That means a lot. And I do have a second one.
Sure. Did you email it to me so I can show it or no?
I didn't.
Okay, we'll just listen then. That's fine. So what is it?
So it's a 2-part poem. The first part, I'm just going to preface it, is me sinking into a nightmare. And the second movement is me rising back up. This is going to be included in an upcoming anthology by Rick Christensen and Damian Hay, Dead Pets Anthology. It was originally published in Diner, February 2004.
Oh, I remember Diner. I missed that journal. Is it still around? I don't think it is.
No,
I had a poem in there. It was one of my favorite, actually. I loved all the work.
Nice.
Yeah.
Eve Refka did a really nice job with that. So this is called Ice is Growing Up the Wall. Dripping stalactites from the ceiling. Someone I don't know pushes my buttons. Crust of frost melts. My reliefs brief-lived. Remember, I kind of forgot to feed the dog. Remember, I'm guilty of her second death. I loved her muzzle. What's happening? Happening isn't the puzzle I love. My first death second. In the gilded mirror, I feel that I'm the dog, almost dead, my feed semi-forgotten. If I hadn't remembered that relief is but melted frost, would crust or buttons push me to know my inside-out self that thrives briefly beneath a ceiling of stalactites? The wall growls down the ice.
Oh, another great ending there. The wall growls down the ice. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Karen. Great poem.
Thank you.
It was Karen Marker with a pair of poems. And I forgot to share, I promised I would, the link to Mike Bales. Let me put these in. I'll put it in Facebook, and if you want to check that out, that library interview that Mike did. I'm putting them in the chat windows too. Okay, let's go. We have a couple people left. Let's go to Brian O'Sullivan.
Hello.
Hey, Brian. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. Thank you.
So what do you got to share?
So I've published very few poems, but there's one that I published that actually fits the prompt.
Oh,
that's
perfect.
The first time that happened to me, so I sent you a link.
Yeah, and from One Art, which I love that journal with Mark Danowski. It's a great turnaround. The submissions are just emails.
It's awesome, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Hold on.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, I called Audrey Friedman Karen Marker. I'm sorry. I got confused. I'm sorry,
No
Audrey.
No problem.
Yeah, that was Audrey Friedman. I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong
Karen
thing.
Marker did beautiful work. I'm honored to be called Karen.
Yeah. Well, you're both great. But yeah, sorry about that, Audrey. Okay, but anyway, Brian. So this is One Art.
Okay.
One Art
Right.
is
It's called
oneartpoetry.com. This is from 2021. But Mark Danowski, great editor. You just email him poems as submissions, and then he replies in like a day or two. It's amazing. But
No, he's great. Yeah.
yeah. So what's this poem? Tell us a little bit about it, and then go ahead and read it.
Okay. So it's based on an experience with my mom who had Alzheimer's at the time. And the unstuck part is actually kind of a reference to Unstuck in Time from Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of about, being unstuck in time because of memory issues and because of the anxiety of the character me listening to the memory issues. So that's what it is, called Unstuck. Is there a newsreel, dear? Mom asked in the darkened cinema, her voice bubbly. And I want to tell her that there are no newsreels anymore. Edsels are gone and flying DeLoreans are coming. But I know that for her, newsreels are now, and reading buttered popcorn, I feel my hand clenching under my seat's arm, picking at dry bubble gum. And I don't want her to hear sirens, so as the screen flickers, eyes smiling through tightened jaws, whisper back, no newsreel today, Mom, but watch.
Another great ending there, too. Unstuck by Brian O'Sullivan. Thanks so much for sharing that, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, Brian O'Sullivan from One Art. That's oneartpoetry.com. Let's go to Bishwajit Mishra. Hey, Bishwajit, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, Tim. Good evening. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So what do you have to share?
I sent a prompt poem, but mine don't match with the sizes, the length you have. All of you have. It's called Rumbling Sinister. I think I sent it.
Wait, it's called?
The Rumbling Silencer.
The Rumbling Silencer. Oh, here we go. Okay, so you sent. I see. Okay, the Rumbling Silencer. Okay, and so did you have fun with the prompt?
Yeah, actually, the one I wrote for the prompt, I didn't send. I sent it just now in case we have time. This is the one I had written a few weeks ago. And I just thought, I think that was a one sentence poem. But I had a line break somewhere, so I went and fixed it. I just sent it.
Okay. So, okay. So
I always love prompts, but this was before prompt.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's go. Let's hear it.
Okay. The Rumbling Sinusoid.
And what does cynosure mean? That's a word that I would have to look up myself.
Oh, cynosure. I thought it's the attraction of the eyes or the soul attraction.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, I like that.
I have used that word in 3 of my titles. I just love that word.
It's a good word. I'm gonna have to start using that too. I like that.
My son-in-law asked the same thing. First time we heard, what does it mean? I guess I'm using an archaic word.
That's great.
I'm old school anyway. I love that word. The rumbling sinusoid. My aging followed a parallel path. My embarrassments grew with the body, matured into humor with her accented botched Hindi, which might come at times in rare company of low English words. Idiot, nonsense, mispronounced, sometimes misapplied. I'm not sure if she understood them correctly. But I had seen pictures of me as a few weeks old naked boy in a black and white odd-sized photos, the edges of which were corroding as if melting away inside of crimpy, wavy frames, which had grown smooth with time and grime in a house of smudgy mud walls that I have no way of remembering. Though I recall being told that in that house I was born, and they might have grown with me into lime mortar, then into concrete, then her controlling, which I resented like any other child like me. And I remember that. Grew as well, to letting herself be controlled with glee. Might have been some pride too, when she would run all and sundry by me, even on short, long-distance calls that my brothers had to make for her, but my lag kept growing until after the monsoon was gone, and now thunder trails the lightning sparkle of my mother, like it has always been.
Oh, beautiful. I love that ending, the rumbling cynosure. And I love that word. I'm going to have to use it all the time now. Thanks for sharing that. Do you want to do the other one? It's up to you. I think we have time.
If you have time, I don't mind. That was actually I didn't finish it, but that was the prompt poem I sent it, and then I picked this one. So actually, there are two important girls in my life. That's my mom and.
That's perfect.
Okay, so it's not too long. Okay, 27. It's again weird title. Salubrious leftover. An evening of verse is always something I look forward to. And before it ends, I come up from my basement office to my calm-looking wife, ready with the reheated pizzas. A couple of nights ago, it was snowing when my wife suddenly had a craving for pizzas. A rarity. She was hesitant as it was a late, cold, wintry, snowy night, and we had already eaten out lunch that day. I was happy to make a run because she rarely wants to eat out. Maybe she's hard to please with a dish, being a good cook herself. I grab the reheated slices and go down back into the virtual meeting of poets. To finish the meeting, the heat from a turned-off fireplace radiating pleasing warmth feels better. Sometimes a turned-off engine, warm with potentials frying, ready to brave through the wintry night. Food becomes its real self, one of the rare occasions. Test is just a sidebar. I hang around a bit while my wife goes to bed, still recovering from being under the weather. I make a few calls, then the messages start to arrive for Holi, the festival of colors, coloring a cold gray evening, and I keep reveling in the twilight of leftover warmth, wrapping up the day.
Great memory there. Yeah, thanks so much for that. Salubrious leftover. Wonderful. Always a pleasure, Bishop. It's great to hear you.
Thank you.
Great to see these poems. Yeah.
Have a good night.
Yep. Take care. That was Bishop Mishra with 2 poems. Let's go to Kashyana Singh next.
Hey, Tim. Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you great. Yeah. What do you have that you would like to share? How are you doing tonight, first of all?
Very well. What a great evening yet again. And I agree with Dick. It was like a masterclass.
Yeah, it's just wonderful. I mean, both poets had such great insights into poetry. It was really wonderful. So what do you have that you would like to share?
I sent you a poem. It's called Can Chat GPT Make Butter?
Very interesting question. I wonder. I think they might hire us to make butter for them. It might be how it turns out. But let's
if we get to singularity, that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think so. We'll be like the labor for the AI, I guess. And we'll be like crawling around fixing the wires will be our jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, so can Chat GPT make butter? Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Tim? Yep. Okay. The poem's called Can Chat GPT Make Butter? I asked them about making butter. They judged my question, a smirk, then asked me a reverse question. Do you want a poem? Want me to do a haiku? A Shakespearean style? Or do you want to butter someone? As in trying to ass-lick someone? So is it about the churned white stuff? Not white as in white people? Not dense, but white as in milky white? Beaten into existence? A pint of heavy cream produces approximately 1 cup of butter. Do you like it sweet or more salty? You know what I mean? Butter is also quite old-fashioned, a generosity type habit, mostly extinct. Farms in past called it a separation method. I think it is transformation, a cloud-like fluffiness, pale-colored, settled into hand-pressed solid, utterly and butterly delicious. Okay, tell me how I can help you with butter. Because only if you ask, I tell. Become better than the bitter butter you bought. So stop wasting my time and yours. So stop testing if my knowledge is any better than the butter left from the buttermilk of whipped better cream. I'm stumbling because your queries are not succinct, nor are they focused on better outcomes for butter in terms of timing or procedures, nor do I care. Echo chamber, the pixelated eyes of my therapist.
That's great, Hyben. That wonderful haiku at the end, and such a big transition. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. That was
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, that was Kashiana's thing with Can ChatGPT make butter? Wonderful. Thanks, Kashiana.
Thank you.
Okay, so that is everybody on the Zoom. Let me pick up a couple poems before we wrap it up. Let's see. We have Nivedita Karthik is here. I think I'm gonna do. Let's see if we can do it like this. How do we? Trying to figure out how we did Nivi's. There was a way that it was easier to do with the video. How was it? Well, let's download it. I can't remember. Okay, so Nivedita sent us a video. Let's go. We'll come back once it's downloaded. Let's go to Alex Retty has a poem here, or two poems. Poems for the Rattlecast. No comments from Alex Retty, but here they go. Gentility. Let's take a look at these and see what Alex would like us to read. Gentility. A gin and tonic in the nearly over afternoon, the sobs of the morning women waft, it's cruel to say but true, so pleasantly through the house and the screened veranda that death becomes another little treat we give ourselves for living. It's a bit like Christmas Eve bereavement. You put on your best cufflinks and bow tie and brace yourself for the crowd, hoping all the while you're doing it the way Mummy taught you. Everyone envies the dead except the dying, she used to say, and sweat appears like raindrops on your wrists as you remember. Oh, that is a wonderful poem, Gentility. And then in a second little poem, too, let's read that as well. This is a poet who's new to me, but it's wonderful. A less venerated saint. My symbols are Gestetner, glue and staple. I sat here at my little table while others went abroad. Do you find it, as I did, odd that I left odds and ends while colleagues I had called my friends? Left vitae, epistles, gospels, and acts? I envied them, but died without regrets. Some are made fishers of men, others are menders of nets. Hey, wonderful. I mean, the formal poetry, you can hear how great that is. Okay, let's go to... Yeah, thanks for sharing those. Once again, the poet, that was Alex Retty. Great stuff. And it's Alex Retty, Rettie. So next time, if you send more poems, join the Zoom link or share a link to your website or something so we can share that. But that's Alex Retty. Great poems. Thanks for sharing, Alex. Katie Dozier has a prompt poem. She says, I try to make it as long as possible. It turns out to be 14 lines. So Katie likes to do these sonnet -1s, which are 13s. That's a funny there. But she pushed it to 14 for this prompt. Here is Some People Burn Through. Let's hear this one. Some people burn through sentences like they're cigarettes, the additives of adjectives, the hot ash of the past tense, the smoke of hypotheticals wafting up to an ice blue sky. And one such man sparks under strung-up bulbs, flicked on despite the afternoon, as if to say, I glow for me alone. And he lights the next one with a death of first, never pausing, a cycle lit by the exclamation dangling from his weathered lips. Never mind the clatter of keys jittering, clipped to his hip. That's great. Some people burn through, pushing it there, Katie. Katie is the main host, and I co-host the Poetry Space on Twitter. So if you're on Twitter, follow Katie_Dozier to find that space. Really fun. We also have we made it a podcast because everybody asked if we do it. So it's recorded and it's a podcast too. So find us just go to like Spotify or whatever and type in the Poetry Space. And that's a freewheeling discussion about poetry every Thursday. This week we're talking about metaphors. So appropriate for Brian Morrison coming up. Let's see what else we have. Because we're running out of time. Oh, Jerry Stephenson is here on the Zoom. He had jumped in late. Jerry, are you there?
Yeah, jumped in late. Jerry, are you there? I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can, but you got to mute your.
Can you hear me?
You got to mute your background, Jerry. Let me mute you for a second. Jerry, you got to mute your stream. I think you're watching on YouTube while also being on the Zoom. So mute or shut off YouTube and then unmute yourself on Zoom. But I have your poem here too. Let's see. Back there, Jerry? Let's see.
Back there, Jerry? Can you hear me now?
I do. Let's see. I think the echo's gone. Yeah. Nope, the echo's back. Okay. Jerry, I'm going to read another poem. And then we'll see. But you got to turn off your YouTube or your Facebook or wherever you're watching this. Okay. Let's see. Sharon Ferrante says, I'm watching the show but not Zooming. So we'll share Sharon's poem as well. The Museum of Broken Sculptures. This is Sharon Ferrante's one-sentence poem. Here we go. And Sharon pushed it long, too, for Sharon. She's known for writing short poems. Let's see what Sharon does with this prompt. The Museum of Broken Sculptures stops you at the door, inspecting your parts. You know nothing is free. You must lend a hand, or Bigfoot's, shake a leg like Elvis. Spread your arms until they go numb. Then give a witch's nose or an ear from an elf. And if you are a philosopher or a poet, a whole head is preferred. Unless, of course, you have already lost your head. You can stay with them. A new one will be attached as soon as it's available. Great poem. The Museum of Broken Sculptures. I love that. Thanks for sharing it. Let's see. Jerry's gone. I'll just go to read Jerry's poem because we're coming up on time, and no one else is on the line. So let's read Jerry's poem. This is Bingo. Pass me the blobber. This is the prompt, the one long sentence prompt by Jerry Stephenson. Here we go. Bingo, pass me the blobber. Let me try to zoom in. There we go. What a poem in one sentence for a prompt. Could life get any better? This is like winning the jackpot at church bingo on Sunday night after confessing lies that AM to make my humdrum life sound edgy to an elderly priest who, for all I know, could have expired and forgot to charge me with scores of Hail Marys or Hail Somebodies. Hopefully there is gallons of burnt hall ladies' aid coffee left to wash down the wafers and kill the scent of communion wine on my breath that I pillaged from the closet in the coat room next to the Sunday school. Oh, that is great, Jerry. Thanks for sharing that. That was hard to read, pushing it so hard. I love it. That was Jerry Stephenson with Bingo, Pass Me the Blobber. Another great poem. Now, I got some tragic news to share. Wendy Barker died this week, last night. And Eric Campbell, who's a good friend of hers, asked me if I would read this poem to share. She was 80 years old. She was on Rattlecast number... what number of the Rattlecast was she on? Number 35. So if you'd like to see an episode with Wendy Barker, just a wonderful poet, wonderful human being. She was one of the first year of the Rattlecast. She was a guest on Rattlecast 35. What was it? Singing on a Blackbird was her last book that we were talking about there anyway. But so do check out that Rattlecast. Here's Wendy's poem just in memory of her. Maybe I'll make a daily poem, one of hers that we published. This is What Surfaces by Wendy Barker. So let's close out before the haiku, and we'll read this poem. Here we go. What Surfaces by Wendy Barker. Another chip in the white enameled sink, only 3 years old. How I've tried to keep it pristine, and yet stainless steel pots scrape it till the black cast iron breaks through. What's below a surface gloss? Now the flesh on my hands has grown so thin the layers underneath show through, rivery veins and knobby metacarpals. Knuckles like pebbles, like rocks, I've bordered my rosebuds with stones from Blanco Creek. How long did it take to shape those irregular rounds and ovals? Our house, built of blocks mined from the quarry only 5 miles up the road, limestone formed in the Paleozoic era. My favorite paperweight, a fossilized clam I found in the backyard, remains from the time the land around us lived under the ocean. Something so pocked, wizened, holding my papers in place. Arriving at the Grand Canyon, we've all peered down at those dozens of rock layers, granite, dolomite, sandstone, shale, basalt, formed 2 million, maybe 2 billion years ago. And who would want to mend that great magenta, purple, blood-shaded rip in the earth's surface? It's what we come for, to gawk at all those layers exposed. So beautiful poem in memory of Wendy Barker. Just a wonderful, she was a real deal of a poet and a human being. I hope everybody will check out that Rattlecast, check out her books, where, poets live on in their books and their poems. So thanks for sharing that, Eric, and for letting me know really sad news that Wendy passed on. All right, so we're going to wrap up the show now with our Sciku. And the Sciku for this week was inspired by this article from the College of Computer and Mathematical Sciences at the University of Maryland. So here is the article, and we have new NASA DART data prove viability of asteroid deflection as planetary defense strategy. And so what happened here, if you remember that DART mission where they crashed a small satellite into an asteroid to see if they could deflect it possibly to save the planet in one of those disaster movie scenarios. What they found analyzing the data at the University of Maryland was that it deflected the asteroid more than they even expected, so about 3 times more. And what happened, it turns out, is they had the energy from the impact that they calculated, but they didn't include the amount that the ejected matter pushing against the asteroid would push the asteroid in the other direction. That whole Newton's second law of motion, and so it pushed the asteroid more than they even thought. So it worked even better than they planned by a factor of 3, which is good news if you would like the Earth not to be obliterated by an asteroid or comet. So really good news from the University of Maryland, and really fun to see that. It was really cool watching that impact as the asteroid hit. So here is the Sciku inspired by that science story. And once again, the Sciku, the whole point is just show that news happens besides for politics and the stuff everyone's talking about. There's always science news going on. So here's a Poets Respond haiku. And here it is. First kiss, nudging the comet away. First kiss, nudging the comet away. That is my Sciku for today, and that is the show for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. It's been wonderful. Jennifer Reeser was a great guest. Brian Morrison, great with a metaphor. We had the Poets Respond early on. Really wonderful stuff. Next week's guest in the Rattlecast is going to be Rachel Custer. Rachel's book, Flatback Sally Country, is her second out from Terrapin Books. She is one of the few people who's been a return guest. I like to have people who are especially great poets, but don't have a publicity that they should. I think Rachel Custer is one of those. She should be winning awards. She's really wonderful. Flatback Sally Country is her new book, writing about people that don't have poems written about them. Rural people, marginalized people in their own right from rural Midwest. They're persona poems in the kind of mode of what is that Edgar Lee Masters book about all the people portraits. They're poems in that vein. Just a great book, though. Flatback Sally Country by Rachel Custer. That's going to be next week's guest. The prompt next week, inspired by Jennifer Reeser, is this right here. Write a poem in the voice of one of your ancestors and use formal verse of some kind. So that's going to be the prompt for next week. Think about one of your ancestors. Anybody can be somebody, a great story, a tragedy, anything you want. Think of one of your ancestors that you can know a lot about, you can know a little about and be making it up, but write a poem in their voice and then also use formal verse of some kind. That is going to be your prompt for next week. And then we will talk to Rachel Custer on next week's show, Rattlecast number 186, Monday, March 20th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope you enjoy your week. Hope you write a great poem for the prompt. And we will see you then. Have a good night.